Hey, everyone on there listening to Place Navigators. Thank you for coming back. Hey, I'm Chris Elder,
And I'm Joe Platts.
and just kind of do a quick episode recap of number four. We talked about how time builds wealth in real estate, and that was a really awesome episode. We gave some examples. You really need to go back and listen to it if you didn't listen to it, because it shows you the power of what real estate can do. And we gave you real numbers, not real names, because we kept it private details. We scrubbed that, but it shows you how that happens. And we could show you that over and over and over again with our own personal or with other people's information. So go take a look at that episode. Joe, what do we got this episode, brother?
Well, I'm super excited because we're actually bringing on, for the first time on Place Navigators, we're bringing on a guest. And our guest this episode is Dan Edwards. Dan Edwards is a real estate professional who wears a lot of hats. He's the managing broker for the Eastside Real Estate Team, which services the east side of the Seattle Metro, which is like Bellevue and Kirkland and the surrounding areas. He is also the growth leader for Keller Williams Realty in Everett, Washington, which is a Ben Kinney owned company and part of the Ben Kinney network of companies. He's a trainer. He's a productivity coach. He's a technology lover, husband, father. I think maybe he'll even share with us he's got some plans for expansion. And Dan joined the industry in 2006 with a prior professional background in sales and business and technology. And all of these things just brings the full package together to make him a top performing real estate professional. So without further ado here, I'm going to welcome Dan to the stage, and we're going to talk about let me see, I gotta find this thing here. There we go. All right, there's Dan.
Yeah, what's Dan. Up, bro?
Hey. Yeah, so Dan, we wanted to chat with you, and thank you for joining us. We wanted to chat with you about the absolute essentials to preparing a home for sale. But before we do that, why don't you share with us just kind of the latest and greatest that's going on for you and all these hats you wear in your business, and just kind of share with us a little bit more.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. Thanks for that intro. I mean, it seemed very flattering, and I actually got overwhelmed listening to the amount of hats that I'm wearing. And I actually very rarely actually physically wear hats, and that's because I'm not bald. I've got this great head of hair. But most importantly, check this out. So of all those things that you listed, right, skill sets that I've developed over time over the last 18 years in real estate, in the world of skill sets, right, I'm probably still under 1% of the abilities to do good things. So I'm like, while it sounds super accomplished, it's really just a drop in the bucket. I'm not an Olympic rower. I have never, I've climbed a few mountains, but I've never climbed Everest. Right. So I appreciate the things that we had in that intro, but it's just a tiny little blip on the radar of what's really significant in the world. So, but thank you, Joe. Thank you, Chris, for having me on here. I'm really looking forward to this topic. It is actually one of the things I'm super passionate about.
Yeah, for sure, Dan. Well, we love that, and love that you're a humble servant leader at the same time. So first question, Dan, that we run into in talking to sellers, and we kind of wanted to take this perspective. We wanted to take the perspective that what Place Navigators is Place Navigators is a place that is resources for not just the homeowner or the real estate owner, but also the real estate agent. And so the idea is we want to navigate people through the process of building their wealth through real estate, the whys, the behind the scenes, the answers to the questions, the confusion that the media creates. And you and I mean, you started in 2006. Well, 2006 is the year that Zillow entered the scene, and where Zillow was then and where Zillow is today is two different things. But I'd say like the very first thing that a homeowner will often look at, and the very first thing that they will usually bring up with their realtor is a Zestimate. So talk to me about how you and your career, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of deals completed. What's that pricing conversation that you have with your friends and with your clients?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I think the pricing is probably what most sellers think of first when they think about selling their house, right? They're like, well, how much can I get? And I have to say that, we're going to talk about some other topics that really, really feed into this one. And so I think it's important to almost demystify the price conversation. And this is as I come from it, talking to agents, like, how do you get in there? Is don't get caught up on the pricing so much, because the market's going to bring the buyer. The buyer is going to determine the fair market value, right? So if you're in a buyer's market, there's downward pressure on price. If you're in a seller's market, there's upward pressure on price. And I think that if you can get agreement, and this is an honest conversation, like if I'm talking to a seller directly, like, don't you agree that it's not going to be me and it's not going to be you that sets the price? It's really going to come down to how your home stacks up in features and benefits against the competition out there. So, of course, your sellers, we're going to look at Zillow, right? And there are other automated valuation models that we can look at to kind of get what I call a dartboard. So, you think about a dartboard, if you're aiming for a target, right? It's better to have a dartboard than just a single dot, because you're going to kind of zero in on price. I use automated valuations as a dartboard. This is kind of our jumping off price. And essentially the idea there is we now all know what the computer analysis says. Now let's get that human touch to it. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, that totally makes sense. And I love how you say it's like our jumping off price. So when you start looking at that, like, what is it that takes, you start looking at, the data versus the market value? Like,
Yeah.
What is it that you're doing there?
Well, of course, the data, it doesn't look at the brand new finished floors, right? The data doesn't look at the the remodel that you did in 2019. The data is not going to find that it's south facing and has lots of natural light, or the opposite, right? So you've got to balance those two things in order, and you're communicating this. Sellers need to be on board with this to understand. Like, I know sellers are looking for properties. When you see a house, how do you feel about this look? How do you feel about that? And we'll talk more about that too. But the data doesn't say everything.
Gotcha. So it doesn't point out the good or the bad, like the fresh baked bread or the smells like cats kind of thing.
Well, it smells like cats for sure.
Yeah.
That would definitely have a negative impact in some sense, but honestly, that those two things aren't going to make up that much money.
Yeah, for sure. So what about the preparing the home for showings, or the showing experience? Or, I know for homeowners that if they're living in a property that they are listing, that can be kind of tough. And I know walking into a vacant property can kind of be tough also. Like, the warts stick out a little bit more when there's nothing to distract the eye. So what about that would you share with our community?
Yeah. So the truth of the matter is the quality of the product is what's going to determine how high on the pricing scale it goes, right? So, if we always want to have the belle of the ball, right? We want to be the shiniest penny, that type of thing. And another expression, if you will, is the parade only comes through once, right? So, or first impressions. So we want to create this parade environment. And I'm actually having a conversation with a homeowner right now about a space that it's like, when they're done, they decompress. This is their space. And the conversation is, and for the next 2 weeks, you're going to have to not have that decompression space, right? If it's your goal to get the top dollar, right? So I'm trying to help them see that it's their decision, right? It's their decision. If they want to just say, nope, I'm leaving it, then so be it. And honestly, you start to become a little bit of a marriage counselor here, right? Because the wife's been telling somebody to do something for years, right? With that
Never happens.
ugly nightstand
Yeah.
that
I'm not guilty of that at all.
right. Yeah, you didn't have a couch that carried over, right? I mean, I had that couch that was very, very comfortable, but it was gone. I got the uncomfortable, nice looking couch. Anyways, so that's my story.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And I think that's where like the benefit of working with an agent versus being a for seller or for, wow,
I call them
for sale by
unrepresented
owner.
sellers. Yes, unrepresented sellers. Yeah.
And I feel like that's where having that agent that's representing the seller, hosting those open houses and showings and all that stuff really gives them kind of an outside look because can you talk a little bit more about that aspect, like why it's so important to work with an agent and for home showings and all that?
Yeah. So, like I said, I call them unrepresented sellers because essentially there's no representation. And another way to put it is, when you go to court, what do they say? Something like a fool is his own representation or something like that in court. I don't know how that saying goes, but yeah, you can sell your house by yourself. You've seen people do it. As a matter of fact, before I was in real estate, I did it, and I left money on the table. I know 100% now because of what I know now. So having a professional there creates an ability to push back when the negotiations come. But from a standpoint of also having that having that hard conversation like about preparation for the property, having the hard conversation that says, and honestly, not even that, but the resources, right? The resources to get the home ready. So, I've got a handful of inspectors. I've got a handyman, painter, carpet cleaners, all of that stuff. And they come with a mindset of, we're getting this ready for sale. Not we're going to show up and sell the homeowner the best new carpet ever, or the best, a great paint job. And I've got a very nice anecdotal evidence of listing a home that was a rental property as is. We just put it on the market. We spent 2 weeks on the market, no offers. We took it off, we painted it, staged it, changed out features, put it back on the market. It ends up selling in 3 days above asking price. So I have strong anecdotal evidence. I've got before after pictures of video that I show people that just are like, I don't believe it. And they see the difference and it just makes a lot of sense. So having an agent there can help them kind of get through that.
Nice. That's those stories I think are really critical in helping people just kind of understand. We go through times in the market where it feels like a property will just sell if you just make people aware that it's for sale. But I think that goes back to that conversation you brought about, I think there's times even with agents that money can get left on the table. And so, that's kind of a perfect segue into maybe the next question, which is, what does marketing that works look like?
Okay, so it's a bit of a loaded question, but here's my belief on the marketing side of things is we want to create the biggest funnel we can of potential buyers. And that doesn't just begin with putting it onto the MLS. It also begins with the reputation of the agent and the agent's built database. Like if you as a agent have been in the business for a while, you've collected potential buyers. I know, Joe, you definitely have probably thousands of buyers across the market area that you work in here in the Snohomish and North King counties. So I can actually go into my database and I can plug and put in a search parameter and get a list of potential buyers. So that's kind of a bigger funnel than others have. But the most impact you can have is professional pictures, 3D tours. I don't do this, and I should, but floor plans. Floor plans are one of the top things that get looked at on a listing, on a website. So having good, clean, professional photos, I swear, that if you hire an agent that uses an iPhone, you get what you deserve. for your photos, because iPhones are awesome. And as a matter of fact, I think my photographer uses the iPhone like 15 Plus Pro with some compression for his videos, and they look great. But if they're walking through like this, taking pictures, forget about it. It's not going to turn out well. And you're doing them a disservice. They pay you a good amount of money for marketing your home. And it starts with quality marketing collateral.
Yeah, for sure. I see that Chris has got another couple of guests that he's bringing onto the show, so that's pretty cool.
Yes.
If you're just listening
hi
to
to
the
Blue.
audio, you're going to miss out on the extras that we brought to this episode. So I know for me, Dan, I have a guilty pleasure, and I actually save some of the worst marketing I have ever seen in the industry, and I keep this catalog of like disasters. And so my very favorite disaster is a situation where honestly the home seller was probably in a bad situation. So I don't mean to make light of that, but I absolutely wanted to point out that their agent didn't serve them well. And what the scene is that it's a living room and the walls are painted canary yellow. And for whatever reason, probably a health reason, but for whatever reason, there's actually a bed in the living room. But the problem with the bed is that when you look at the bed, it's very clearly that something is in the bed, and the bed has a tiger stripe bedspread over it. And what's in the bed is a
This just keeps getting better and better.
Yeah, I know.
Go into
But
this.
the MLS in Washington has a rule that you can't have a person or the likeness of persons in your MLS photos. So what the listing agent did is he cropped the head off of the body in the bed. And so the living room shot is a bed with a headless body under tiger stripes in it. So what's the biggest wreck you've seen in marketing? Because that's my number one in my collection of
oh my gosh. The one that just jumps to mind, there's many of them, but this just jumped to mind, is bear chair.
Bear chair? What's a bear chair?
There's a room with a chair, and then there's a bear in the chair. And that's it.
A bear in the chair, like a taxidermy bear?
No, like a teddy bear, like a tiny little teddy bear. The other ones that are pet peeves of mine are bathrooms that are like this big with a toilet, and the toilet seat's freaking open.
Yeah.
I mean, these are pet peeves of mine, but God,
at least clean the toilet if you're going to leave the toilet open.
Yeah, I should have prepared for this because I've got all kinds, but the bear chair just jumps out of me. This is a bear in a chair,
just casually hanging out.
But it's their staging, right? It's like
no. After you definitely have your house professionally cleaned.
No, I just figured it out. I'm sorry, Chris. Go ahead and finish your question, but I just figured out the best one.
Oh, okay. So like once you guys professionally clean your house, which is like what we recommend, you should be looking at getting photos done afterwards. But before you do the photos, you should be walking through. You as a homeowner should be curious and make sure that, hey, I know a photographer's come through, but as an agent, definitely, if they're not walking through in between those times, and make sure the toilet seats are down and nothing crazy was left open. You know what I'm saying? So like that's super important.
Yeah, and I think too, from a standpoint of photos, it's know your target market. And while you and your missus may appreciate the stripper pole in the master bedroom, it's probably not going to appeal to the broadest market. So I'm just saying, probably take that down for a few weeks. But
or the swing, or the
yeah. Hey, this is a PG show. We're rated on
got it
content, so we gotta be careful here. So Chris, if you're thinking about the home selling process, where's like the natural progression after we price and we talk about how it shows and we try to talk about how it's marketed? Where do we want to pick Dan's brain on next for the must do's for preparing your property for sale?
You know, and you said at the beginning, and it made me think, show me the money. Okay. Because honestly, that's what everybody that's in here is like. They want to get the best deals. They want to sell their house for the most money. So show me the money. What is it that that ensures that happens? Is it the photos? I mean, that's going to lead you to there, but it's also I believe the most important part is having someone that can go in there and negotiate on the seller's behalf. What do you think about that, Dan?
Yeah. So when you said, show me the money, I thought you had me at hello. That's what came to my mind.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it, brother.
Yeah, hello. So the negotiation part, right? It's about leverage, right? So if you are a home seller and you want to get top dollar, you need the highest amount of leverage. So everything we've talked about to this point leads to that negotiation point. When you take away some of those things, like if it's not marketed well, if it's not showing great, and if it's overpriced, your leverage goes away in the negotiation thing. There's another piece of that is controlled 100% by the client, right? And that is their risk tolerance, right? And I 100%, like, we are agents that represent our clients' best interests, but we don't negate their needs and their desires, right? So while it may be in their best interest to be this hard charging negotiator, you also have to understand how much leash you can take, meaning don't pull on them, right? And lead your seller to a spot where they're really uncomfortable. Now at the same time, if you have full leverage, if you have a powerful product and you have multiple offers, then you can really lead with negotiation. And I think, Joe, here's what I would say, and I think you agree with this is where an experienced negotiator earns their money. And it is knowing these things, getting to this point in the transaction and being able to work from experience that newer agents need to lean on experienced agents in that aspect, because we have so many at bats. So I mean, from a standpoint of negotiations, if you don't have a lot of at bats negotiating in a real estate transaction, you've got to learn your contracts really well, and then talk a lot to experienced agents for the situations that you're in to get some ideas on how to navigate through that.
Yeah. That's the thing that I think we wish we could bequeath to our home sellers and to some of the agents that are on our team, or just the ones we're collaborating with in our offices and trying to help them out, is there are some things that cannot be derived by any other way than experience. And I always like to use the example of, Tiger Woods or Michael Jordan, right? If I go shoot hoops with Jordan, it's going to be a different experience. But he says, when you listen to some of his content, he says how many free throws he missed, right? And so that's kind of the difference, I think, between someone who has had a lot of time in the industry, like you, Dan, is that you probably have some misses. And I think sometimes those misses are our clients constrict us, right? The home seller has in their mind what they think is the right thing to do. Like they want to be present for all showings. That's one of those misses that I see. And then sometimes the miss is, it's kind of evolving, that the agent's evolving, the industry's evolving, the market's evolving. So to put a cherry on this conversation, what are the biggest mistakes, just right off your top of your head, Dan, that you see home sellers, or maybe just those listings that maybe those agents haven't had enough at bats, or they haven't been doing it very long? What are the biggest mistakes that you see people make that equate to dollars lost for that person?
Yeah, I think the biggest mistake is not having an honest conversation with yourself and with your clients about where you are on pricing. You can want a price, you can believe it's worth a price, you can have an appraised price, all of those things. But when you analyze it is, somebody has a property that they believe is worth, say, $550. The market says it's worth $500. And they list it for $550, right? Saying, hey, we can always go down. And that always go down means you're negotiating with one person. So having a real conversation about pricing, and then this is the honest truth. So let's say, no, but you know what? This is such a unique property and nothing else is on. There's no competition. We're going to go ahead and push it. That's fine. But the biggest mistake is not revisiting it in 3 days, 7 days, 5 days, 14 days, and saying, hey, this one went pending, that one went pending. They're all smaller than yours, or whatever it is. Something is happening here. How many showings are we getting? We're not getting any. Okay, so it's not being able. And this is a mistake of most agents, is they're afraid to have these conversations. They're afraid to call up and say, guys, we thought this was going to go off gangbusters, but it's going off in a different direction. We need to make a change sooner than later. If you think about selling a home in a balanced market, on average, it was 30 days before you made a price improvement. And that may well be your cadence, but at the same time, data now travels much, much faster than it did before. Your buyer pool has seen that house in 20 minutes of you listing it. So, understanding that if we sellers and agents can work together with an understanding that we are going to look at this as a fluid pricing structure. I think if you don't have that awareness, then you're either going to take a listing that the seller is going to be really mad. It's going to sit on the market for days and then sell for much less than you had wanted. And it's going to create a lot of wasted money on all that preparation. So.
Yeah. It's interesting that you dialed in on that, because I heard a quote recently, and it's one of those sophomoric things that it's like simple, but I'm embarrassed to admit it blew my mind a little bit. And it said 70% of marketing can be fixed with price.
Yeah,
I thought that was interesting.
I've heard it was 80%, but
yeah. Well, according to my kid, 94% of all statistics are made up.
Yeah.
So there you go. Right on. Well, hey, thank you for that.
Yeah. Hey, Dan, thanks for coming on with Place Navigators, brother. The information that you shared with our listeners was amazing. Everybody that's out here, if you're in the Pacific Northwest, Dan Edwards, whether you're a realtor or looking, take a look at them. Again, thank you so much. We talked about in this episode, we talked about pricing. We talked about how it shows. We talked about how to market your property, what's critical, negotiating, and then we talked about some how it went wrong. So everybody that's listening to Place Navigators, thank you for coming on to the show, and we will see you next week or in 2 weeks. So you guys have a great day.